Hello, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, and I'm here with, in person,
Bonni Snyder back in the studio.
Yay! That was kind of fun. At least we went off without a glitch last week.
You know, it was a little, both surreal and, in a way I feel like last week we kind of went full circle because I want to say it was our second show in. I was in Texas,
right?
And we zoomed in and was like, okay, so at least we know how this is going to work when we have to zoom guests in, and then here we are, zooming in. Or I am zooming in again. So
yeah, well, it's good to have you back, though.
It is good to be back.
Better. So we want to, of course, thank. And I do this. I hesitate every single time because I know I'm going to get it wrong. Area 52 Media Group, and we were at a meeting the other day, and I started to say it, and John was sitting right beside me, and he's whispering it. So anyway, our producer, the studio that we're at, and we want to thank them for giving us the time and the space and the opportunity to bring these shows to you.
Especially the magic guy behind the camera and the board, and the board and whatnot. Special shout out to Rob because he is that guy. He makes us look good every week.
Makes us look good, corrects us.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But and puts up with.
I don't know whether he puts up more with our shenanigans or we put up more with his shenanigans.
Well, that's true. There are times.
There is a give and take here in terms of the shenaniganing.
There are times, that's for sure. But anyways, we do really appreciate them both. So, all week I've been kind of in this really weird headspace. I had to go to a funeral of a friend who passed away. Tuesday was the funeral. He was only 59 years old, and it was a shock. But the thing that it's kind of layered on top of a couple of things, and I haven't talked to you about this yet, but and I don't want to go into it a whole lot because there's a whole lot of stuff we have to do, and we need to get to chapter 14. But with the timing of the year, school just starting. Just 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't here in Pasco County, it was a school in Pinellas County. Just prior to school starting, a young girl took her life. I've spoke to her mom. When they're ready, I've invited them to come on the show. I'm really proud of them because, and I don't know if, to me, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail until I have more information, but to me, this particular school, there's an issue at because since I've been involved in this life, there have been several suicides at that school. And it seems that the school, there's two issues. The school isn't addressing the bullying from what I gather from things that I've been reading, and they're not addressing the aftermath with the students. And it seems to be a really big issue. And it just seems that this particular school, and I don't know if it's just because it's on the radar now again, there's something at that school. There's just seems to be more issues and teen suicides in the last several years at that school than needs to be, or comparing to other schools. I don't know. What you kind of work in the school system?
I do work in the school system.
Okay.
There's a difference between kind of and a do.
So what do you think?
Not the Pinellas school system.
Yeah, you don't work in the Pinellas school system. You work in ours. But do you have a pulse on that within our school system here? Everybody in the Tampa Bay area has gone back to school now, I think.
Right. Well, we are back in school, and I think Mind you, with me just getting back from, I call it vacation, but it was really not. It's kind of hard when, people think of vacation, you think of, people are going away, have fun and, sun and sand and surf and, do all that stuff. This particular, I took a break. Let me just put it this way. I was on a break last week, because as you know, I shared, it was, the anniversary of us losing Pat. And yesterday was my first day back in the office. But to your question, when it relates to, schools and when there are, high incidents of, whether it be, teen suicide, bullying, and the, consequences. I couldn't get the word out there for a moment. The consequences that happens that relate to whatever the dynamic is going on, not being completely read in on this particular situation and what happened, and what are the statistics coming out of that school. Because sometimes I tell people to be very cautious in terms of I hate labels, but at the same time, there's a little hypocrisy that goes on here. I hate labels, but in my line of work, mental health, what do? We label things. This person is depressed. This person is, is suffering from, an addiction, the disease of addiction. This person is schizophrenic. This person is bipolar. So it's like, well, you don't like labels, but you label people. Okay, I get that piece. But I think what happened, I say, but at the same time, what happens is, there is a laser focus that happens on whether it's a school or a community where a high incident of whatever it is, comes up. And this could be true of anything, teen suicide, what's going on in this community that we have a high rate of gun violence, what's happening in this community that there's a high rate of domestic violence. And so, for me, when my brain gets to moving in terms of what's going on there, I look at, total dynamics. What are the contributing factors that's going on? Is it coincidental that it's that particular school, or is there really an issue in that school? If there is a high rate of bullying, then my question would be, what strategies are in place to address the bullying? Is it that the school just isn't addressing it because, and I'm going to go, branch off on something else over here. So let's just say there's a lot of bullying, but it's not being addressed.
Right.
Okay. Is it not being addressed because there are blinders to the fact that bullying is going on? Not in my school, that whole, we learned it in school, that acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. Now, when we think of NIMBY, it's, I think more of, I'm going to build a prison. Hey, I'm all for building a prison, as long as it's not in my backyard. Okay, you build it over there, but not here. However, I still think that sometimes that way of thinking also happens when we're dealing with, certain social issues. In this particular case, we're talking about, a teen taking their life. Not here. This is an anomaly for us. Is unfortunately how some people tend to look at it.
Right.
And so if I can put blinders on, and I know it's happening, but I'm going to put the blinders on in terms of what was the cause for it. It makes the issue seem like not as relevant or not as important, or it's not my school. What's going on in that teen's life outside of school that might have led to her taking her life. Right. It was her.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah. It was
and unfortunately, that's kind of like it had to be the parents. It's always the parents, and that whole it's got to be the mom. It's the mom. It had to be the mom. And I was like, I don't subscribe to that as well, or either, I should say. And so again, to kind of roll it up. Is it the school? Is it the community? Is it coincidental? And I know for the schools that I work in, or the students that I work in, a lot of times my first, week, in school when I'm, with these groups of students, I always, and I do it in a way that it's not like calling anybody out, or so no one doesn't feel apprehensive about, this is what we need to address. And so I will give each student like a sticky note. And I was like, I want you to write the top 3 things that you guys want to talk about over, the course of the year. What if you were to list your top 3 issues, what are they? And I'm not surprised that bullying is one of the, if not the top thing that students put down, because it is a problem. Here in Pasco, and if I go, ASAP for a moment, the Alliance for Substance Addiction Prevention, our youth-led part of that coalition did a awesome presentation on teen mental health, which I think, and I have to give a shout out to the stand vice president, Maddie Horn, who I would love to get her here, in studio with us one day. It's amazing, I love this girl to death. But she put she and the stand vice president, I believe, put this presentation together. But anyway, it does an amazing job on focusing on the mental health issues that teens are dealing with. Teens are battling between, not fitting in. Some students, we're wrestling with the self-esteem and everything else like that. So I think until we have somebody who is willing to not only acknowledge that there is an issue, but they're also willing to do something about it. Because now, let's just say, for argument's sake, the school does have a policy on bullying. However, the rates of bullying are still high. Then, for somebody like me, I would look at it as, okay, let me, educate me on what strategies that you're using. And, if, those strategies are not adequate enough, okay, let's look at different strategies. Or, these strategies worked for a while. Now I've got to do something else. I could, liken it to, I want to lose weight, okay? And I go on a diet, and so I'm on this diet, and I lose X number of pounds, but then I'm stuck right here. And it's not that I'm not doing anything to not lose weight. It is now I've got to add something on top of that. Well, so in addition to, this diet, Bonni, you need to, go into the gym and work out, or you need to do some, physical work. So sometimes, and I use a lot of, analogies, and metaphors to explain things. So it's like, we might be doing this, and that this might be, we have a zero tolerance on bullying. Okay, we have a zero tolerance bullying on campus. What are you controlling off campus? What's going on, say after school.
Right.
Not to say that it's the school's responsibility to not only police what's going on within the campus, to also police what's going on after school. However, how many times as, in my profession, do I hear students say, I get bullied at home, I get bullied in the classroom, and let's just say little Johnny is bullying little Susie, or vice versa in class. Well, they also ride the same bus together. So, one or the other is getting bullied on the bus. And, what happens? Wait a minute. They have the same bus stop. So now they're being bullied at the same bus stop. Oh, but wait a minute. Let me take it another step further. They just happen to live in the same neighborhood and they're across the street. So the bullying continues. And I think it takes, I'm a firm believer in that it takes the village.
Oh, yeah.
And so, once we involve, school, the community, and then, you may or may not have to include some, agency, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a mental health, type of agency to address this issue. It's going to stay an issue. But yeah, I would be, I'm a behavioral kind of person. I'm not as nerdy at stats as, say, some of my other stat nerdy friends. However, I do have a deep interest in stats when it comes to behavior, and as I'm looking at it, so wait a minute, I just heard you say, there's a problem in that school. Okay. So for me, the question then becomes, when you say it's a problem, what does that mean? He's like, well, there's a high rate of suicide coming out of that school. Okay. So the problem is high rate of suicide. All right. So let's look at it from a behavior standpoint. What do we need to do? What's causing the rates of suicide? Right. And kind of go from there.
Well, one thing is I'm extremely proud of this girl's parents because, like I said, it's only been a couple weeks, and they are speaking out, which more often than not, parents and families don't. I was actually supposed to go down and visit with them on Tuesday, and they were being interviewed. A reporter came over from, I think, Channel 13 News, did an interview with them. And so they're speaking out, even though it's really super raw, and I'm proud of them for doing that, and hopefully things are going to be addressed. I hope, like I said, when they're ready, we'll have them on the show, and then we'll have more information. It's not just what I'm reading in it, and the information that I'm getting is from the mother. Mm-hmm. But it was just the school wasn't even addressing the aftermath. Mm-hmm. The principal, it was well over a week before, or a week or so before the principal even acknowledged the parents in the situation. So there's two different dynamics going on there that's not right. Somehow.
And see, for me, Tammy, when I hear, I'm going to kind of piggyback on a couple of things, you just said. More oftentimes than not, parents are not speaking out when their children die by suicide. And for me, it begs the question, are parents not speaking out because no one's talking to them? What I find, in my work is a lot of times no one's reaching. Let's go back to, let's think back for a moment. And, this may seem a little broad. However, I think it makes sense. When you lost Bobby, what happened? They handed you a list of funeral homes and said, here you go.
Yeah, that was it.
And that was it. From that experience, here, became the Bobby White Foundation because, guys, and you're an adult, and you were an adult who lost an adult,
right.
And who talked to you? Nobody, except for here's some funeral homes, see you, bye.
Right.
And that was it. So I wonder if, using your experience as an example, how many other families are in that same situation?
Well, you're exactly right. And that's why we started the foundation, is because of that,
And then the other thing I feel is, I'm going to put, say parents, or not even necessarily parents, but loss survivors in a couple of different categories. So there's the one. Are we not talking because, no one is either encouraging us to talk or coming forward to giving us an opportunity to talk? That would be one. Number two would be, are we not talking because we're still caught up in that, we talked about those stages of grief. Are we still in that denial? It's like, right now, my brain is trying to process that my child is gone, and therefore I'm not able to speak. Or there is that third category where I would put these parents in, where I would put Kira, in, us in. Hold a minute, country, or hold a minute, folks. There's an issue here that needs to be addressed, and somebody's going to be the one to, somebody's got to put a voice to it.
Well, and that's like with me, it was really a year and a half before I spoke publicly about what happened. It's not that I didn't talk to people about it. There's just some people that at that time it really wasn't worth getting into because of how I felt they would construe things. But then when it came that time, I didn't want to be this voice. This was not how I planned these years of my life. But it came to that point where I felt like I had to, because of that. It's difficult all the way around. And it goes to show, this just doesn't discriminate whether it is a child or a 62-year-old adult.
No, it's not. I think, unfortunately, I mean, we talk, here all the time about, this is a difficult subject to talk about for some people. Some people want to dive right in it, and I know it's a joke.
I know.
It's that joke between you and I, where it's like, hey, I want to get involved. It's too soon. I'm like,
well, yeah, you had just...
But see, for me, however, in my mind, and I'm like, I appreciate, what you said to me that day, and the fact that it's too soon. It wasn't like I didn't take it as a total brush off, although, I did say, who the devil does she think she is to tell me it's too soon? And I think, but even saying that, here for me, for instance, making it about myself for a second or two or three, is, I was in a unique place in that being in the profession that I'm in.
Right.
I developed this capacity to compartmentalize.
Right.
So there was that part of me that, I mean, even now, I would think of, I'm a firm believer that if I were not in the profession that I'm in right now, would I be doing this? I don't know. I mean, personality-wise, might say, yeah, Bonni, you would. However, we have that unique ability of being in the places that we are in life allows us to be able to do this, to the capacity that we do, and the manner in which we do, which takes me to, here's that fourth area. How many parents, not a dig on you, mind you, by no stretch of the imagination, but how many people are, hey, I need to talk about this, I want to talk about this, however, they're blocked. And again, this doesn't apply to you, our interaction. I'm just making that clear, folks. Just in case anybody's wondering. Are blocked because it's uncomfortable for the person that you're trying to talk to.
Well, and that's very valid, because it goes even broader than that, because I got this other book, and which I didn't get the information to Rob, so he can't put it up, but I will have it on the Facebook page and the link to it. But you know how, like, when we go through these things, and it's not just a suicide death, but say it happened when my first husband died. Your friends go away, and in this book that I read, that and we read into it differently, but it's this, and it's our favorite. It's Dr. Wolfelt. It's his book. That's their way of protecting themselves.
Right.
It's not really, it's not us that they're kind of leaving. That's how they protect themselves from the situation.
I look at it from the two perspectives. And you're right, that's our probably our favorite person, on this particular topic. The other side of it is, and I remember I posted something on my social media page the other day, and if I get the phrasing wrong, forgive me. But the meme said something to the effect of, it's not those who are with you when the storm is brewing or when the storm is happening, but it's it's about those who who are still with you when the storm is over.
Right.
And, when I think about, any loss, I remember, in the, early days of, after Aiden, after Pat, after any loss, how many people were, oh, we're here for you. And, just pick up the phone, I'm here all the time, just, call me whenever you need me. And, I'll be here, I'm here, I'm here. And people who were like in my living room like every day for that. I'm going to say the entire month of August, probably into a little bit of September. But then once the service was over and I got back to
Everybody goes
life,
back to their lives.
everybody went back, and there's a few people that will pick up the phone. Hey, with the anniversary, hey, just checking on you today, thinking about you today and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, you're thinking about me today. Where were you 2 days ago?
Right.
And again, I'm not knocking, my friends or family, my support network. But it is it does, shed that spotlight on, after a loss, those of us who have, who are the nucleus of that loss, let's just say, or actually I should say the nucleus is the person that were lost, that are left in the aftermath. My life's not going to be the same.
Mm-mm.
Your life's not going to be the same. This person. Y'all's life, for the most part, is staying the same. Yeah, you get to add in that piece of, I'm a source of support for Tammy, for Bonni, for this family who, just lost their child. It's a little different than saying, hi, I'm Bonni, I'm a lost survivor. Hi, I'm Tammy, I'm a lost survivor. Hi, I'm insert this mom's name, a lost survivor. It's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, some of it might be a protection. I won't talk about this anymore. I think the other part of it is because the effect on them, the effect of the loss on them is very different than it is for the person who experienced the loss.
All right. Well, that's true. I mean, when Michael passed away, and actually it wasn't so much until really when Bobby and I moved up here. We only had one friend from those years that stayed, and he's still in touch with me now. He worked with Michael. One friend. And that with the situation with Bobby, the nucleus of friends, it's just two couples. And like his best friend, nothing, just crickets. And in a way I can understand, especially after I read the passage from Dr. Wolfelt, that it's because I tend to have taken it personally, especially with a couple of these guys. And but then when I read what Dr. Wolfelt said, it's their way of protecting their feelings, and I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can go with that. But yeah,
I was excited last week to get my daughter.
Oh yeah,
that was very impromptu, and I love the fact that she was able to to jump on with us and whatnot. She of course we were back in the Midwest where she was born. I told she was a little emotional about this.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, we'll do.
Yeah,
we'll do this again.
But that's good. I think she did excellent for just being like thrown in there. And
oh yeah, well, I mean she'll tell you she's in she's in the medical field, and she's like, I'm used to getting thrown into stuff, But when you're talking about I bring her up about protecting people's feelings. Because I think about her, as well, where, prior to losing Pat, she'd visit my house, she'd come over quite frequently. During that first, that time, before the loss and whatnot, she was at my house all the time. But then it got to where her coming, like I would go to her house, very frequently, or I go to her house more than she comes to mine. And we had a conversation one time about don't go to my house too much anymore. Like, what's going on? And, it since, remodel, did the remodel job, on, Pat's room and whatnot. And I just remember her saying, he's not there. And I'm like, what? And I'm going to very loosely and cautiously use the word angry, because it wasn't a malicious kind of anger.
Mm-hmm.
But she was upset. Maybe upset is a better word. Patrick wore ball caps all the time. And in his room, I had purchased these plastic chains, and he'd had a hook up in the ceiling and another one like in the wall, where we fashioned this chain, and all of his ball caps were hanging on this chain. Well, when I remodeled the room, I didn't put the ball cap chain back up. And she says, that's not his room anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was like, his stuff is not, I changed the room, too much. And for a minute, I was offended. Like, what? Like, wait a minute. Like, this is what he and I talked about in terms of what we were going to do with his room. And so I'm like, and for her, was that little thing of his ball caps are not, I refer to that room as it's Pat's room. But the fact that his ball caps were not hanging up anymore. And I'm like, do I need to hang the ball caps back up? But it does, in that thing, it does bring to light, like, how do each person protect themselves from their own grief? I mean, she and her brother were, and you guys heard her say, they were like this growing up. Now as adults, they were either like this or they were like this. But, but seriously, that, was a good example of, how, people, protect themselves from their own, how the grief or how the losses affected them.
Well, and I can't tell you the last time my brother-in-law and my one sister-in-law have been over to our house. And, of course, that's where, Bobby died, but they came in the beginning, of course, because when I broke my leg, they helped me out a lot, but no, and I know it's, that's their way of kind of, protecting themselves too. So, I mean, I get it. But it's kind of like, for me, it's like, well, you guys got each other. I'm just me. And I get left out, of some things, but I learned that that's just them. But anyways, yeah, it's yeah. Well, this other book that I got. Well, I promise we're gonna do our chapter 14. I promise. But I got a couple other books from our favorite Dr. Alan Wolfelt, because of what had happened recently. I lost my cat Jack, which was really heartbreaking, because he ended up being, even though, I mean, he was kind of like my cat in the beginning, because I had to bottle feed him every 2 hours for several weeks. He was only 2 weeks old when we got him, but and this is not, I have talked to my my neighbor she's who I talk to all the time, and it broke her heart too. But he got hit by a vehicle. It shouldn't have happened. He shouldn't have been there. But he never goes there. It's like one of those things, like with Bobby, we'll never know why. And with Jack, I'll never know why he did that, because, if any vehicle would pull in, we have a huge circle driveway. Any vehicle would pull in our driveway, and he was up front. He hightailed it to the back. He was very cautious. And so I don't know why he was where he was at, but I guess it was just his time to go be with his dad. But, and I wish my arms are really short, so I don't do selfies, because I can't. I just, doesn't work. But oftentimes, and sometimes it would irritate me, but he would walk in between my feet, And I'm like, I'm going to fall flat on my face one of these times because you're going to trip me. But he'd want me to pick him up, and he would put his paws around my neck and give me a hug. And I'm like, I wish I could get a picture of this, Jack, but I just don't have long enough arms. So I just figured it was time for his dad needed him, and he had to give his daddy some hugs. So Dr. Wolfelt, I mean, like, we've talked before, he's like probably the most renowned person that we know on the subject of grief. And, we found him because of the suicide grief. But this man is a prolific writer on grief of all kinds. And I will have this information up there. And actually, when I order these books, I order more than one so that we have a library of them for the foundation. And a friend of mine just this week, she lost her dog. And her and her husband were just beside themselves. So I gave her this book here, When Your Pet Dies, A Guide to Mourning, Remembering, and Healing. And it's for when you lose your pet. And so we were at a mixer Wednesday night. I said, I'm going to see you tomorrow night. I said, I'm going to bring you this book. So I gave her this book. And then the next one I got, and this one here, even though it says Healing a Spouse's Grieving Heart, a lot of it, even with our other ones that he writes that are particular to suicide, basically can be translated to any type of grief. Whether you lose a child, a grandchild, or, a parent. Although he does have books that are specific to those too. But I got this one. I ordered these at the same time because of Jack. And also Tuesday, if I can get it out, is my birthday. I'll be 61 and born in 61. I think that's kind of cool. But it's also our 30th wedding anniversary. So trying to get through that. But we're planning on, and we got married in our backyard. And we had what do they call it, a string trio, like a string quartet, but it's 3 people. I think it was a violinist, a harpist, which I loved, and a cello, and they played the music down by the lake. So we have Art for Hope coming up September 8th. It's our fundraiser for the foundation, and Teresa, one of our volunteers, she's also a loss survivor. She lost her only son, and I think he went to Mitchell High School. So she's talking to the orchestra director of Mitchell High School, and we're going to see if we can either have a string trio or a string quartet playing the background music at Art for Hope.
Oh, nice. That would be nice if they could do that.
So, yeah. So I thought, and Teresa was like, don't you think that would be a trigger for you? And I said, no, I really don't. I really don't think so. Number one, I'm going to be too busy. But I just thought it was kind of fitting, with what would have been our 30th anniversary coming up.
I think it's nice that when we are, involved in the things that we're involved with, whether it is, stuff for the foundation, stuff for the coalition, everyday life, that, we do these things that remind us of what we had with the person that was lost. And I mean, Teresa's her name, but she does bring up a very valid point, is this going to be triggering? And where, yes, you're referring to something specific, that this was a moment with us. I think it's, important to understand that, anybody who's suffered a loss, where you're going through, anything could be, triggering.
Well, the whole event could be triggering.
Well, I mean, true that, going to, here, this week, when I look at my social media page, for instance, it's like, here's your memories. And I want to say it was yesterday, the day before. I want to say, between yesterday, between the 11th, that day through, today, my memories just blew up with everything that I posted during that time frame, and it was like, one of them was like, I know people are telling me that I'm posting too much, but my thing is, it's my page, don't read it, don't read, get out,
Right.
don't read it, just scroll past. But even that, things that pop up, a memory, a smell, a song, all caps hanging up. So,
Well, with Art for Hope, Teresa is she's going to be one of our speakers at this event. But she's also the co-chair for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for the Pasco County Out of the Darkness Walk, which is, I believe, October 1st. And I'm one of the speakers
oh, nice.
for the Pasco County Out of the Darkness Walk.
Nice.
I just found out this week. Actually, I made a suggestion and ended up being volunteered. But, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
So we got this event, we have your event. I mean, and this always happens this time of year too, and especially since we're kind of sort of coming out of COVID, I guess you'd say. All these events are starting to happen in person, and it's a very busy time between now and December with events. And everybody's excited to, for the events. We have our door over here. Maybe next week we'll get that door on the set that'll be auctioned off. Yeah, there it is, my nieces. That is our feature auction item. And it's funny because when I'm out, I've been out a lot lately going to meetings and events and, talking about our event and stuff, and I talk about the door. And every single time I draw a blank of what song, the words that they put on there, so now I got to remember it because I'm looking right at it, let it be. Our great nieces will be there, and we've got a stained glass artist that I think he's doing a special piece for it. Our artist that you bought the piece from last year, she is going to be there.
Good. I finally made her and told her. I got your
we've
piece.
got 2 local featured artists.
Hanging in my house.
And
upside down.
we're getting a lot of our gift baskets for the raffle is going to be really good. So everything is really coming together really well. So, and it's going to be here before we know it.
Yes, it is.
But I'm, happy about that. So that's the main thing that we're working on between now and then. Is I just know that I just blink and it's going to be here. But so
Well, let's
finish.
Let's spend about 10 minutes on our book.
I'll see how it's been like a few weeks since we've been able to get to it.
Yeah. So we're
in chapter 14, right?
Yes. Sidestepping Bad Support is this chapter. And when I started this chapter, it's very interesting, for me that this chapter, mind you, we would have done this chapter a couple
weeks ago, yeah.
But, I'm a firm believer in, divine intervention or things happen when they happen.
I believe that too.
But looking at this, the very first sentence of this chapter where it says, even with the best of intentions, other people's, quote, support, unquote, can feel anything but supportive. Platitudes and cheerleading can come from all directions. Rude, insensitive, dismissive comments are unfortunately the norm. Most people don't mean to be cruel. They just haven't learned better ways to be supportive. And when I read that first paragraph, it resonated with me because, it made me think of, even though there are people, when you're going through, your grief and loss, that there are people that are going to look at you and say, oh, I'm here for you. I'm so sorry that this happens. What can I do? Let me bring you food. Let me, I'll stay the night with you. Let me pack a suitcase. I'll come and hang out with you. The other, comments that, as it says here, it's not intended to be cruel, but the other ones, they're in a better place. It's time to get over it. Move on. you have, and I'm thinking of some of the things that I was told. You have other children, it was just their time. And, I think I said that, my ex, Pat's dad, when he was like, well, it was just his time to go. And I'm like, you're talking about our son,
Yeah.
first of all. And, I don't believe in violence, but I wanted to strangle him. Like, how could you say this about, our child? I'm not going to do a ex bashing here. It's just not, that's not professional. However, sitting back and thinking about, what that particular paragraph says, it is important to remember that, support looks different for other people. And, even though, your brain might not be in this place to process, they weren't coming, their intention wasn't to be rude. In that place of grief that you're in, sometimes I'd be like, what the fill in the blank did you just say to me? Like what? Like, how could you say such a horrific thing to me in the light of what I'm going through? And so, sometimes, I would say embrace whatever support you get, even if the support doesn't feel or look like support to you.
Since you said that, a gal that I know just recently, within the last few weeks, she lost her son. It was a car accident. He had been drinking. And after his funeral, the last several days, she's been posting on Facebook a live post, been talking about her grief, her going through her grief. And yesterday, her post was just on that, what people say. Mm-hmm. And she, in a way, she was really kind of funny, but she was mad, and she was just like, come on, people, get with it. And I made a comment on her feed, mm-hmm. Our favorite comment from Dr. Wolfelt, that there's no such thing as closure.
I like that.
Closing,
I loved when he said that.
Closing is for windows and doors.
I loved when he said that.
And it is so true, and I like what you said too. People are just, for the most part, are just trying to do the best that mm-hmm. they can for us, even though it may not be what we need at the time. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I like, the follow-up to this, to that is where, she talks about, the note on being nice and how, a lot of times we won't correct people when they say something insensitive because we're, quote unquote, being nice. And I mean, and I'm kind of literally paraphrasing this, where, she goes on to say that, where the origins of nice came from, it actually means foolish or ignorant. So being nice really, literally to be without knowledge. And so, it's like when you are being nice, you're saying what you believe to be true, even though what you're saying may not necessarily be true. And so I'm looking at this, I'm chuckling now as I'm talking to some of my friends and we have different opinions. I'm just being nice right now. You're just being nice. Nice, yeah, nice literally means without knowledge. And I found, for me anyway, I found the origins of nice. I had to read that. Well, like a couple of times, it's like, really? Aha. So put it in a whole, different perspective. And so, as with, bad support and being nice, it's only fitting that, they're saying what they believe needs to be said at the time to ease your grief without, and that's not being malicious about it, mind you, but without having the knowledge of, that's not what I want to hear, that's not what I need at the moment.
Well, I was talking to somebody the other night, and it was funny that funny but not funny that she said this, because this is something that I have dealt with and felt with both of my husbands, actually, that they would call my husband my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he's not my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. He's my husband. We didn't divorce. Right. He passed away. Mm-hmm. And there's there's so many people that's how they refer to him, as an ex, and it's like, they're not an ex. I'm just like, really? And I just look at people and I'm like, how can you correlate the two?
And I think, because people have I think about the same thing, when the question comes up, those of us who have lost children, how many children do you have? And I say I gave birth to three, I have, what I call my bonus children, and adopted children. However, I have three that I gave birth to. And then when I hear, and sometimes I find myself, since I lost Pat, I have three children, two of which are living. And, just leave it at that. But sometimes I ask myself, what is it necessary to, discuss
to qualify,
thank you, qualify is a better word.
Yeah.
Qualify that only two of my children are living. Because then, is it going to spoil? Oh, wait a minute. I was like, yeah, my youngest one is gone. And so, to your point of, ex, and it was like, oh, so, where you told, my oldest son lives in Kansas, my daughter lives in Florida. Well, you got three. Where's the third one? Oh, he's in heaven. And along with that, again, back to this whole, supportive thing is, then it becomes the barrage of questions. How did you lose him? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, it was like this, and then of course that, follows with the 2019 was a horrible year for my family because we lost, Aiden in February and Patrick in August, and then I was like, oh, and then that puts the need for, support and empathy or sympathy or whatever you want to call it in a whole nother dynamic to where it's all right, guys.
Right.
It's okay.
Well, and one thing that I really like about this book, she gives you space and guidance for exercises to help work through things that she has in this book, which I really, really like. She has a space here, and she says, set a timer and write your responses to these two questions. What do I gain by being nice? What do I lose by being nice? Mm-hmm. I think that's, especially when you read and reread what she says about being nice, mm-hmm. and going from there. Are you stuck? I'm often asked what to do when a friend or family member seems to be stuck in their grief, and I don't think people, for the most part, get stuck in their grief. It's their grief. We all deal with it differently. Although I have had probably more on maybe my mother feel that I get stuck in my grief. But I don't feel that I am. I just process it my way. Uh-oh.
No, I'm grinning because this, are you stuck? To me, that was an interesting part of the book because we talk a lot in mental health about having stuck points. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, are you stuck? And then, of course, my brain all the way went to, all right, stuck point. How do those two dynamics mix? And where I agree with what she's saying here in terms of when people say this person is stuck, I love that follow-up sentence where she put, so what does not being stuck look like to you? Mm-hmm. Which I think was an excellent way to highlight that, as we always say, grief is not linear, and it does look different from everybody else. If I were to look at being stuck and stuck points and put that in, like how it, stuck point is not being, or being stuck to me is not being able to move on. So the difference between, we're always going to have a hole in our heart. You're always going to, have a sense of that loss. At the same time, however, where I would say you're stuck is when that loss prevents you or, is an impediment to anything else going on in your life.
True.
And so it's like, well, because, I continue to talk about Pat, I continue to talk about Aiden, you continue to talk about Bobby, you continue to talk about Michael, this person, whoever, continues to talk about that person that was important to them that is lost. Okay, no, we're not stuck. Okay, we are honoring the people that we lost. But if by us honoring them, it makes you uncomfortable, that's on you.
Right.
So I think, as we're winding down here, next week
We'll finish up.
The chapter next week. Because obviously we want to get to the housekeeping piece.
Yeah, so please, and that 988 number, the new number, that is both a call and a text number.
Okay.
So you can call or text the new number 988 as one of the helplines.
Yeah, the platform itself hasn't changed, just the number has changed to make it easier for people. Instead of having to put in, 7 to 10 digits,
Right.
Actually 10 when you count the, 800, it's now only 3.
Right. So our quote for today,
We talk about them not because we're stuck or because we haven't moved on. We talk about them because we're theirs and they are ours, and the passage of time will ever change that.
there's always hope.